everyone. And I want to thank my friend and colleague, Rabbi Eitan Kruel, from Houston, Texas, who's now a rabbi there, but he's a colleague from Israel. And he assembled parts of these source sheets, and I added more. But he made a source sheet in a commemoration night for his father, Hanoch ben Freda and Israel Kruel. So in his memory, I also told him I'm thanking him, and I'm also dedicating this lesson to the memory of his father, who passed away on the Rosh Chodesh Av, the first day of Av, which was on Monday. So when we talk about Tisha B'Av, that's his beautiful picture here. When we talk about Tisha B'Av, okay, we turn our source book to in a moment, but it's one of these holidays that no one knows about. Okay, in Israel as well, most kids, if they don't live in religious homes and observant homes, they don't know anything about it because it's during the summer, and during the summer everyone's on vacation. So most Israeli kids don't know much about Tisha B'Av either, which is interesting, right? Then I'm sorry, yeah, maybe we have to yeah, hello, hi, yes, here, please take the source sheet, welcome. So on Tisha B'Av is really a very special day in that regard, that it's not a holiday that we celebrate, but of course we commemorate, and it really tells a very important part of Jewish history of something that happened thousands of years ago on a specific date, and we commemorate it on that specific date from generation to generation. And Jews have been fasting in the diaspora on this day for centuries and centuries, right? What does it come to commemorate? It comes to commemorate the destruction of the first and the second temple, that both happened on that date. Now, if I was a historian and teaching at history faculty in any university here, I would ask, the first question would be, Rabbi, how do you know that it happened on the same date? Okay. Isn't it a coincidence that both the first temple at 586 BCE and the second temple at the year 70 CE, right? Okay. Both were destroyed on the same day. Okay. And also you might ask, does it take just one day to destroy a temple? So it's more than that. So our tradition teaches us that this happened on this day, okay? But there's no really historical evidence that it happened on the same day, but the rabbis like to group things together, okay? If it's like a sad day and bad things happen, let's just pile up a few more incidents, and that actually creates a very interesting phenomena for Tisha B'Av. Again, it's if you turn to page 2 to number 3 in the source book, and it's also here, okay? So it is taught in another Baraita that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, whoever eats, oh, I'm sorry, I meant to go to number 4. You see number 4? What else happened in Tisha B'Av? The first crusade officially commenced on August 15th, 1096, on the 24th of Av. Okay, so that's, also bad things that happen. But before we knew the actual date, people related that to Tisha B'Av as well. Okay, and killing 10,000 Jews in its first month and destroying Jewish communities in France and Rhineland, which is Germany. So it's associated with Tisha B'Av as well. Then the Jews were expelled from England on July 18th, 2090, the 9th of Av. Okay. Then Jews were expelled from France on the 10th of Av. The Jews were expelled from Spain on July 31st, which is the 7th of Av. So it's all around Tisha B'Av. Germany entered World War I on August 1st and 2nd, which is the 9th and 10th of Av, which caused massive upheaval in European Jewry and whose aftermath led to World War II and the Holocaust. And on August 2nd, 9th of Av, SS Commander Heinrich Himmler formally received approval from the Nazi Party for the final solution, which marked the beginning of the Holocaust, during which almost 1/3 of the world's Jewish population was murdered. Okay, so you can also even relate Tisha B'Av to the Holocaust. On July 23rd, which is also the 9th of Av, 1942, the mass deportation of Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka began. And finally, lately, the Amia bombing on the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires killed 85 and injured 300, including the mother of my dear friend, Rabbi Claudia Kreiman. Her mother, Sosi, was killed in this attack on the 10th of Av as well. And it's commemorated around the Jewish world. So a lot of bad things happened on Tisha B'Av, or on the month of Av. And that's why the month of Av is not considered like a good month in the Jewish calendar.
So you wouldn't get married.
You wouldn't get married in the first 9 days of Tisha B'Av, okay? Because what happens is, towards the end of the day of Tisha B'Av, there's sort of like a flip in the way we are supposed to behave. We stop mourning and we start hoping. We start hoping, first of all, in the tradition for the Messiah to come. He is born on Tisha B'Av, okay, which is a very interesting tradition. And the other thing that happens is also that once the fast is over, so there is another very important holiday in the month of Av, which is Tu B'Av. Have you ever heard of the holiday Tu B'Av? Okay. Have you heard of Tu B'Shvat?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what does Tu B'Shvat mean? Celebration of the trees, right? But what does Tu mean? Okay. Two, okay, use tet vav, okay. Tet is 9 in gematria, okay, and vav is 6, okay. Together, 6 plus 9, 15, okay. So Tu B'Shvat is the 15th day of Shvat, and Tu B'Av is the 15th day of the month of Av. And why is that so important? Because that is the Jewish Valentine Day. Oh, it's Chag HaAhava. It's the holiday of love in the Jewish tradition. Okay, people went out and got married on that day. Interesting, right? The Mishnah from the time of the Talmud tells us that they were the best days that the Jewish people ever had was Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av, okay, where the young women of Israel, okay, went out dressed in white and were dancing around in the vineyards, and the boys were like, oh, I like this one, I like this one, and they started, dating and getting married and mating in that order, okay, and that's why it's until today it's celebrated in Israel as the holiday of love, and it's like a beautiful day in that regard. But it's already from the time of the Mishnah that it's remembered there. So there's there's sort of like a twist in the middle of the day of Tisha B'Av. Towards the end, it flips, start being hopeful, and it goes to the 15th day of Av, where it's the day of love. So the month of Av has two names. Okay, the first name is the one we know, which is Av. Okay, but if you were in the synagogue and we blessed the new month this Shabbat, you remember what we said? We said Menachem Av. Okay, so yeah, have you heard the name Menachem?
Yeah.
Okay, nice Jewish name, right? Right. Okay, and that means the comforter, the one who comforts. Okay, and the story on page on page source number 8, okay, on page 4. So the following story supports what Rabbi Yudan said in the name of Rabbi Abu. A man was plowing his field when his ox lowed. An Arab passed by and asked, "What are you?" And he answered, "I am a Jew." The Arab man said to him, "Untie your ox and unharness your plow as a sign of mourning." "Why?" he asked. "Because the temple of the Jews is destroyed," said the Arab. "From where do you know that?" asked the Jew. "I know it because your ox lowed." Okay, answered the Arab. So, meaning, so I'll continue and explain. While they talked, the ox lowed again. "Harness your ox and tie up the plow again, because the deliverer, the Mashiach of the Jews, has been born," said the Arab. "What is his name?" asked the Jew. "Menachem, comforter," answered the Arab. Okay, so there's this custom that the Messiah of the Jews is born on Tisha B'Av, and it's interesting that it's a non-Jew that is telling the Jew that the Messiah is coming. This is kind of like similar to the Christian tradition, right? Yeah. Of announcing when.
Are there any dates attributed to this story?
So it all happens on Tisha B'Av, and it's part of Eicha Rabbah. You see number 8, it says Eicha Rabbah. Eicha Rabbah is like a book of Midrash on the book of Lamentations of Eicha. So this is why we know this tradition happens around that time. And that's why a lot of Jews gave their children the name Menachem in the diaspora, sort of like bringing that hope that we always have for the salvation of the Jewish people.
Did that help Menachem Begin?
Maybe, yeah. Menachem Begin is very, very well known. Yeah.
It wasn't very comforting.
Yeah.
I remember.
So that's a little bit about the month of Av. And what happened according to Jewish tradition on Tisha B'Av? So let's go back to source number one, and I just want to ask, can I have some water, please? Thank you.
Okay.
Here, it's taking care of it. So the at source number one, the Mishnah. Oh, thank you. Okay, good. Thank you very much. I'll do it. Thanks. Okay. So the Mishnah discusses the 5 major communal fast days. 5 calamities, matters occurred to our forefathers on the 17th of Tammuz, and 5 other disasters happened on the 9th of Av. On the 17th of Tammuz, which is a fast day that we mentioned last month, okay, the tablets were broken by Moses when he saw that the Jews had made the golden calf. The daily offering was nullified by the Roman authorities and was never sacrificed again. Okay, so the daily sacrifice that went on every day for hundreds and hundreds of years stopped by the Romans on that day when they conquered the city of Jerusalem. The city walls of Jerusalem were breached, and the general Apostomus publicly burned a Torah scroll, okay, the Roman representative of the emperor. And Manasseh, who was like one of the bad kings of Israel, placed an idol in the sanctuary. So all these things happen in different dates, but they're all accumulated to say how terrible was the 17th day of Tammuz. And on the 9th of Av, it was decreed upon our ancestors that they would all die in the wilderness and not enter Eretz Israel. This happened in the desert while they were wandering for 40 years. Okay, and they were like kept on complaining about, Moses, and that they want to go back to Egypt. So God, just got tired of them. And the temple was destroyed the first time in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, and the second time by the Romans, and Beitar was captured, okay, which is later on, okay, that's like at the year 134 after the destruction, but that's also a bad thing that happened. And the city of Jerusalem was plowed, okay, as a sign that it would never be rebuilt, as the Romans, like giving that, punishment to the Jews. Not only does one fast on the 9th of Av, but from when the month of Av begins, one decreases acts of rejoicing. Okay, so there's a custom in Jewish tradition for people not to eat meat during the 9th day of Tisha B'Av. My daughter just started working in a restaurant in Jerusalem, and she said, in a meat restaurant, she says, it's empty, there are no customers. Okay. I said, don't you serve fish? Because that's what you do. She said they only have one course of fish on the menu, so, and everyone else goes out and they eat dairy because they'd rather eat dairy. So I remember that when they said the 9th day. And no music, there are no weddings, etc., etc. So what actually happened there? Okay, so a little story in history. At the year 586 BCE, the first temple is destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, the emperor of the Babylonians. Okay,
Gets its own.
Okay. And 70 years later, the Jews return to the land of Israel with the grace of the successor of, with Koresh, okay, the Babylonian king, that allows the Jews to come back, and he's very gracious to the Jews, and they established the temple. 70 years later, at the year around the year 516. The temple then remained standing until the year 70. However, if we remember, around the year 180 BCE, the Greeks come in, right? And with Antiochus, they try to destroy the temple, and the Maccabees revolt, and that's why we have Hanukkah, okay? Because the rededication of the temple. They were able to desecrate it, but they didn't ruin it. They didn't destroy it. The Maccabees were able to conquer it back, and the second temple was saved. And that's why we celebrate Hanukkah, right? What happens is that the Romans get into the land of Israel, okay, towards the end of the last century, of the first century BCE, and they put their presence here with King Herod, who was a Jewish king or partly Jewish, okay, and he rebuilds the second temple. He takes the existing second temple and he builds it to this magnificent building that no one has seen in the entire world. He invests a lot of money in that. And if you've ever been to the Kotel and you've seen the stones there, and you realize how big and magnificent it was. But at a certain point, there are some zealous Jews that start revolting against the Romans, and they want to have like full independence. And the rabbis are sort of like fighting that group, and there's like a lot of inner fights within the Jewish people. You know, I'm talking about what's happened 2,000 years ago, not unfortunately, history sometimes repeats itself, right? So we're hoping we're not going towards that, but these different groups of the zealots and the rabbis, and they're also the ones that go to the Dead Sea, right? They settled there, and they're all fighting, and they all can't get along, and they're all snitching to the Romans. Oh, they did this against you. They did that against you. So all this self-hatred in between the Jews themselves is getting at one another.
Is that the Essenes?
Yeah, the Essenes. Yeah, the Essenes, right. But they're also the Sadukites, that's Dokim, that they are the priestly family, and they're sort of like guarding the temple, and they're making all the sacrifices. And but the rabbis don't like them as well. So they're like everything is messed up with one another, and they're fighting, and they're armed, and they're fighting the Romans as well. And the Romans are sick and tired of this, and they decide to come and put order in this because they're afraid of the revolt of all these Jews against them. And they start coming in from the north, from the Galilee. They start destroying all the different cities there until today, when we do archaeological excavations, we see the destruction that the Romans have left there and how big the Jewish settlements were there, which is pretty impressive. A few million Jews lived here in the land of Israel.
What was the primary reason that the Greeks or the Romans, or put it the other way, why did the Jews rebel, since they really didn't care too much about them as long as they paid their taxes? It wasn't like a hard.
Well, the problem is, but the problem is they asked for too many taxes sometimes. So there was like a tax rebellion, just like, in the United States, right? That's like, the 4th of July, everyone's like celebrating freedom from America, but it was really a tax revolt against the British, right? Against the king. But that was one thing. The other thing is, like, they tried to impose their way of life also. Okay, so unlike in today's world, where you in the Western world, if there's war on territory, but here there was like also a war of ideals, and the Greeks wanted the Jews to be Hellenized and to be not to make circumcision, not to learn Torah, etc. And the Romans also at a certain point said we sort of like need to break the Jewish spirit. Okay, they were idol worshippers, and they didn't want the Jewish religion to to exist, or they saw that the problem with the Jewish religion and having like their own country, it's like they went against that notion as well. And the Jews were a very strong power, apparently, in that time, and they had an army, and they were maybe a threat even to some of the Romans generals. And let's not forget the really most important part is where the land of Israel is located. Okay, between Egypt and Africa, and Asia and Europe. Okay, and the port. I mean, it's on the sea. So it has, there's no oil there, as we know, but people didn't care about oil back then, right? They cared about other resources, and Israel and the land of Israel had that, and they had those stubborn Jews that they thought, we just need to get rid of. So then they get to Jerusalem at the year 67, and they start the siege on the city. There's like, we're not going to attack. We're just going to get those Jews tired. We're going to starve them. And they're fighting amongst themselves. So let them just, fight amongst themselves until they kill each other. And it's really very, very sad. By the way, if you come on this Monday, okay, you'll be able to see. I want to. What happened? Thank my friend and colleague. Sorry, Rabbi Eitan. Okay, sorry about that. But I did want to sort of like show a clip of this movie. Okay. Right. Where is it? Oh, here. Okay, I want to do a promo for the Monday program where we're going to screen this movie. There's award-winning movie in Israel. Okay, and it's animated. Okay, and it won many awards, and it talks about the destruction of the Second Temple and the whole story of how it happened, and also the hatred between Jews, and how the Romans watched from the outside and waited for the right moment to come and destroy the temple.
Would you forgive us? Would you absolve our blood-red sins and turn the crimson cords as white as snow?
Okay, so the story begins at the times of the temple and how all the work at the temple was done. Okay, then it goes on to talk about fighting against the Romans.
The Romans slaughtered my wife, my sons, my daughters. I left everything to protect Jerusalem and the house of the Lord.
Don't believe him, Ben Badir. He too is corrupt.
God wills us to maintain the daily sacrificial rite and to stand together, united. If you really are guided by God's will, you must let us in.
Okay, so this is one of the heads of the Zealots, okay, who's also the nephew of the main rabbi that Israel had back then, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and who represents the rabbis who were much more moderate and wanted to come to an agreement with the Romans, but he is like representing the Zealots that want to fight against the Romans. And he's like trying to convince his uncle, the rabbi, to join their fight, which they didn't. Here's the
storehouse.
And if that runs out, we still have the sacrificial beast.
Absolutely not. No one touches the sacrificial beast.
Eventually we'll have to surrender.
Surrender? You still don't understand, do you? They'll slaughter us all.
Okay. That's a little promo to the movie. Come and watch it on Monday at 6:00. We're going to have a very interesting Tisha B'Av program. Then after the movie, we're going to have a short service and the reading of the Book of Lamentations. There's going to be no food. and no water. So
Yeah.
because it's a fast day. Yes.
One of the problems that I have with Tisha B'Av is that originally, I think, Jews accepted as a sort of communal sins that had been done, whether you go back to the Torah and the Exodus and so on.
Right.
But then comes the Holocaust, and a lot of philosophers look at that and say, "Look, they didn't do anything. You know, there was no communal sin, and they were slaughtered. And so, how do you reconcile that?"
That's a very good question, Larry. I don't know if it could be reconciled so easily. And you bring up a very good point. The tradition in Tisha B'Av is really that because of our sins, the temple was destroyed, because the way we treated one another, and because we weren't following God's word, and because we saw poor people and orphans and widows on the streets and didn't take care of them, and we hated one another, and that's sort of like the narrative, the Jewish tradition of what happened. It is backed up by historical evidence, and it's probably true in a way that because we were so weak as a nation and fighting each other, that it was easier for the Romans to attack us. But in the Jewish tradition, it's like God has sent the Romans to get back at us for not, following his ways and for behaving in an immoral way with one another. There might be some rabbis that say that also about the Holocaust. Okay, I don't say that in terms of the Holocaust. I think the Holocaust is a creation of human beings. Okay, and it's the result of human beings, the Nazis, and their their racist aspirations against humanity, and especially against Jews. And it comes to sort of like teach us the evilness that man could reach. Human beings could create wonderful things, and they could also create a mass destruction like this. So I think each of these days comes to teach us something else, in a sense. So the focus on Tisha B'Av is just hatred that we have to one another, and that we want to see how we can overcome that. So I hope that answers that question. So going back in history, yes, sorry.
I just wanted to mention that by grouping all the negative things at one time, it allows the mental health well-being for Jews to be a hopeful culture rather than throughout time mourning forever. And
Right.
I think that's a really positive aspect of Judaism that needs to be promoted in sometimes.
Yeah, I like that. I really agree.
Oh, we
Yeah,
all agree.
not all year long. And it's very interesting what you're saying, because the book that the Mishnah here, Mishnah Ta'anit, that talks about this thing, actually talks about all the bad things that happen to Jews, but they're the ones that are sort of like grouping it into one date, and also sort of like saying there are too many dates of sorrow. We need more dates of happiness in a way.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, we also on Yom Kippur, we do the al-Chayts, and we take a communal responsibility for things that.
Right, that not everyone has done. Correct. So what happens in the year 70 is that the Romans are really fed up with the Jews and their rebellion against them. And they decide to conquer the city of Jerusalem. People are starving here. There's great famine. People are dying in the streets. The Zealots still don't care. They're not willing to surrender. They're not willing to barge into the Romans, and they go to war, to a hopeless war against the Romans. No reason to have done that. It's like almost like committing suicide in a way, and taking with them everyone else. And the Romans get into the city of Jerusalem. They burn it. We have evidence of that burning. If you've been to Jerusalem, there's the burnt house there. Has anyone ever been in the old city in the burnt house?
And the old city, but I never saw it.
Oh, okay. I'll take you there next time we're there. But it's an entire house that archaeologists found from the second time of the temple, from the time that the Romans burnt it. And the entire city, of course, and the temple, and they literally destroy the entire temple. They plow it, they get everything knocked down. They don't want the Jews to ever come back, and they put a ban on the Jews that they cannot come back to that city. There is one exception in the year 130. There's a new, which is interesting because it's like kind of like 70 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. There is a Roman emperor by the name of Hadrianus. I think it's Hadrian, who's very favorable to the Jews. And probably some of the rabbis, are able to convince him, okay, let us build a temple again, where, we'll make sure it's manageable this time, keep the Roman ruling there, etc. And he agrees. And there's evidence that they're starting to have plans. The zealots that hear that, the remaining of them, are totally opposed it because they want the Romans out of the country. They don't want to cooperate with them, etc. And they start a revolt at the year 134, another Jewish revolt. They haven't learned the lesson against the Roman Empire, okay? And at this time, they are decimated. They say about more than 70,000 people killed in that war. And then the ban, and then they changed the name of the city of Jerusalem to Ilia Capitolina, okay, which is like the capital of the Roman representative there in the land of Israel, and they changed the name of the land of Israel to Palestine, okay? So the Roman emperor is at 134, after, 70 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, he gives them the name Palestine to piss off the Jews, okay? Why does he choose the name Palestine? Because it resembles to the Philistines that used to fight the Jews all the time and oppress the Jews. So he's like, oh, let's give them the name that they hate the most, okay? Jews are then dispersed all over the world. Some Jews are left in the land of Israel and actually start cooperating, apparently, with the Roman regime, and they are able to prosper, but they cannot get close to Jerusalem. Jews are not allowed to be near the temple. There is evidence, there is a mountain that they are allowed to be on, which is Mount Scopus, okay, where the Hebrew University is, okay? So Jews settled there. That's like the closest they are allowed to get to be near. And they have a synagogue there, and they overlook the temple, and that's where they come every year on Tisha B'Av, on the day the temple is destroyed, and they mourn and they cry from there because they can't get anywhere closer. The rest of the Jews, the majority of Jews, are dispersed all over the world, and they go to Rome, they go to France, to all the North African countries, to Spain, of course. It's interesting. I was in Spain, in a city near Valencia. Forgot the name of it. It's and Jews have been there's evidence of Jewish presence there from this time of the Second Temple. Jewish cemeteries, synagogues, mikvahs. What?
Toledo.
No. It's not Toledo. It's not a city. It's an archaeological site.
Oh.
It's a small town nearby. I'll remember the name later on. So Jews have been in all these places and have built big Jewish communities all over. That's how diaspora basically of today that we know, the diaspora is from there. And the first year after, the Jews are like, what's going to happen? Okay, how are we going to celebrate our religion without the temple? And they decide on a bunch of halachot, of laws, of Jewish laws, to preserve Judaism in its new way without the temple. That's how we get services 3 times a day to commemorate what happened at the time of the temple. That's how we have the shofar blowing that happens in every synagogue and not just at the temple. And many other things of that sort that Jews have been doing until now. But they also said, how do we remember the temple? That the memory of the temple is always there, and that's when they sort of like establish the fast of Tisha B'Av, and they say we will tear our clothes and mourn every year for the destruction of the temple of Israel, of Jerusalem, remembering that as an act, a strong act of memory.
Did the Talmudic, did the Zealots fight against the Talmudic rabbis?
So the Talmud is filled with passages against the Zealots and how bad they were trying to fight the Romans and the hatred that they brought upon one another. So they went out against them. So if you look at source number 2, the Jewish calendar, so Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, is the fast day and the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. Among other historical tragedies, it commemorates the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem, as we said before, in 586 BCE and 70 CE, respectively. One fasting abstains from food and other physical pleasures, reads the biblical book of Lamentations, and observe mourning customs. Okay, so some of these mourning customs is sitting on the floor, for example, in the synagogue, not turning on the lights, using flashlights or candle before there were flashlights. Some people, before the fast begins, they eat egg or things like that, or lentils, things that you eat in a house of mourning as well, which is very interesting customs. And you, in the services in the morning, you don't put on tefillin. Okay, you only put on tefillin in the afternoon service, which is something very unique for Tisha B'Av. And of course, there's no eating or drinking. Just like Yom Kippur, you don't wear leather shoes, and you don't bathe, and you refrain also from intercourse as well. So all these, and you don't anoint yourself also with oils and bathe in that way that people used to do. So in specifically about the fast, I'm going to the next source on page 2. On Tisha B'Av night, Jews the world over will read the powerful and disturbing Book of Lamentation, sung to a mournful melody. Written by the prophet Jeremiah, it describes in horrifying detail the devastation that would be visited on Jerusalem, including starvation, violence, and even cannibalism. As a gesture of mourning, many Jews sit on low chairs or on the floor from nightfall through midday, walk into a traditional synagogue during evening or morning services, and you'll see the rabbi and most everyone else on or near the floor with the flashlights or candles. So the Book of Lamentations, it's very sad book and very hard to read about the horrors that happened to the Jews back then, but again, it's sort of like it reenacts again and again the suffering. Regarding the Holocaust, what he asked before, there was even a suggestion by some rabbis that said we have to have a fast day on Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Memorial Day. And we also have to have the customs of Tisha B'Av on Yom HaShoah, or else people will sort of like start to forget that. Because if you just commemorated with a ceremony, but you don't have like religious way of commemorating it, it might be forgotten. So it's a very interesting argument, and I know of a few people that fast during Yom HaShoah as well and observe the customs like here. And there's even there's the Book of Lamentations, so there's the Book of the Shoah that some rabbi wrote in Israel, a professor actually, and I think he's also a rabbi, and he wrote it. And in the conservative movement in Israel and all over the world, people read this book of a Holocaust every Yom HaShoah. Maybe we'll do that next time in our Yom HaShoah ceremony. So this is about the traditions of Tisha B'Av. And I want to spend also a moment about Jewish memory, okay, and the whole notion of Tisha B'Av. And one might ask, why do we do this? Why do we have a day that commemorates something that happened 2,000 years ago? I was like, get over it. It's like it's been so many years. It happened a long time ago. Since then, so many things have happened. So many people, terrible things have happened in the world. And why are the Jews so obsessed with remembering the destruction of the temple and with what happened to them? Okay, so first of all, that memory is what brought the Jewish people back. Right, in 1897, Herzl, okay, has that vision of building the Zionist movement, and before him there are even the early Zionists, okay, that want to bring, say the Jewish people, it's about time for the Jewish people to come back. If they wouldn't have remembered Israel, if they wouldn't have preserved all these traditions, they would have nothing to go back to. Okay, it would all be faded away. The Romans, that big empire, the Greeks, all these empires, they're all gone. The Jews are here thanks to their memory, thanks to their not forgetting this year after year, right? And I also saw this interesting article by Avinoam Pratt, no, I think it's Pratt, that talks about Jewish memory. And he writes the following. That's on page 5. And it's also on the screen. And he says, Judaism is a religion built on a foundation of memory. Okay? In his masterwork on the subject, Zachor, Jewish History and Jewish Memory, the historian Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi notes that the Hebrew word for remember, Zachor, is repeated nearly 200 times in the Hebrew Bible, with both Israel and God commanded to remember the Sabbath, right? Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, okay? To remember the covenant, Zachor et Abrit, remember the Brit, okay? And to remember the Exodus from Egypt, okay? How do we sing in the Kiddush every Shabbat? Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, right? We sit there and we do Kiddush one Shabbat after Shabbat, and we remember something not that happened 2,000 years ago, something that happened 4,000 years ago. We remember how Jews left Egypt. It's like no one's around anymore. Everyone, so many things have changed. But we put that into our liturgy, the memory of things that happened to us in the past that were meaningful. Okay, so as Yerushalmi suggests, one might argue that the commandment to remember has been central to the survival of the Jews in dispersion over thousands of years. How else can we explain the continuity of the Jewish people through millennia of migration, persecution, destruction, and renewal? It all goes because of that Jewish memory. each of us also has our own personal memory, right? We have the yard site. I've asked colleagues in other faith, I don't think that a yard site exists, that there's like you come to the synagogue and you say prayers for someone. When you're at home, you light a candle in memory of your loved one. You come and you say Kaddish, okay? And you do it year after year. You go to the grave. There are different customs of, what people do. But that memory is so powerful in the continuity. Jewish memory reinforces the importance of the victim's voice and the role of the persecuted in recording their history, both during and after collective trauma. This act of remembrance has not only historical and ethical value, but is of great psychological importance too.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah?
Yeah, it is, when you come to the yard site, somebody will say to you, oh, so that your mother died. And then, your mind goes, oh, my mother this,
Yeah.
So you're really sharing it again and again.
Yeah, you're sharing something about your loved one, and it gives you a lot of meaning. My mother, who's on Zoom now, she has been in the last few years and collecting all the data of the family, remember all the uncles and great uncles, and it gives meaning for building that tree of life of a Jewish community. When I was younger, I was like, okay, it's like I don't care about remote uncles I have here and there, but as I grow older, it's like starting to be meaningful for me. I'm like starting to smile at the younger Tzvi that didn't care so much about this, like leave me alone about our distant family. And now I'm more interested in finding out about it as I grow older, and I'm trying to get my kids interested, and they're like, leave us like we don't want to hear about it.
Genealogy
Yeah.
is not important, but I was going to say that when you read out the yard sites every week for us older people, we remember
Yeah.
many of those people. We
Yes.
didn't when we were younger.
Indeed.
Yeah, but now we do.
Right.
And I wonder a lot where their kids are, because, my contemporaries, where are they? They see that their Father's Day this year. I know that.
Yeah. Right. So that whole notion of zachor and remembering and Jewish memory is critical in our in being and how we became a Jewish people. So Jewish memory, he continues, of historical events also serves as a reminder of God's covenant with the Jewish people, but with Abraham and the Jewish people. It helps us maintain our relationship with God through that remembering. Okay, performance, yeah.
We, my family, do not know the dates of the deaths of my grandfather and my grandmother and my aunt, two aunts and their children.
How
It's
come?
impossible, because they were Holocaust.
Oh, in the Holocaust, yeah.
But don't remember, I said you pick a date.
Yeah, you pick a date, and a lot of people do it on the 10th day of the month of Tevet. The 10th day of a month of Tevet is traditionally a fast day. So people that don't know the dates of their loved ones, they say Kaddish on the 10th of Tevet, which is it's like around November. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. It's around January. January, yeah. Sorry. Always fluctuates every year. Performance of the commandments is thus a tool of memory. Every single Shabbat is a memory of two great events in Jewish history, creation and the Exodus. Okay, Zecher Lemase Bereshit and Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. These things are like we're reenacting that, remembering our covenant with God, remember these historic events, and that, okay, is what we're doing through these keeping these mitzvahs. History for the Jewish people is not merely the duty of scholars or a religious elite, which is what happens in other nations, right? It's like the scholars or the religious leaders, the clergy, they're the ones who are remembering for everyone else. Here it happens by everyone. The injunction to remember is a religious imperative that falls on everyone. It is the internalization of history that led the rabbis to say, as repeated in the Passover Haggadah, in each generation, every person should see himself as if he personally came out of Egypt. So in that regard, Tisha B'Av is like every Jew should look at themselves every year as though they were exiled from the temple, as though they were there at the time of the destruction of the temple, so yearning to go back to the land of Israel. And this is what I think really like the whole essence of the Zionist movement is built on that. As former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Jonathan Sachs has observed, there is no sense in Judaism of the atomic, and I think it's the autonomic individual, the self in and for itself we encounter in Western philosophy from Hobbes onwards. Instead, our identity is bound up horizontally with other individuals, our parents, spouse, children, neighbors, members of the community, fellow citizens, fellow Jews. We are also joined vertically to those who came before us, whose story we make our own. To be a Jew is to be a link in the chain of the generations. That's all it is. It's being a link, a character in a drama that began long before we were born and will continue long after our death. Memory is essential to identity, so Judaism insists to be a Jew is to know that the history of our people lives on in us. Okay? So that is basically really the whole essence of Jewish memory and Tisha B'Av in my notion of why we remember that. And it's very meaningful. And I want to conclude with a very interesting question that was asked in the conservative movement in Camp Ramah, okay? Because Camp Ramah always happens in the summer, and Jewish kids learn about Tisha B'Av only through going to Camp Ramah because they fast there in the camps. But they sort of like felt that should they observe the entire fast, for like 25 hours, like in Yom Kippur, or could they stop the fast after Mincha? And the reason they asked why Mincha is not just to make it a little bit easier for the kids to fasting, is also because look at this interesting question. Okay, is one obliged to fast for a full day on Tisha B'Av after the state of Israel was founded and the reunification of Jerusalem? May one alternatively limit the signs of mourning and break the fast after Mincha? Okay, so you wouldn't fast the entire day. You would recognize that something in history has changed. The people of Israel are back in the land of Israel, okay, through the help of God, and the Zionist movement, etc. But miraculously, after 2,000 years, we're back in our land. The state of Israel exists after 1967, the Six-Day War. The city of Jerusalem is reunified. Okay, Jews are back in their land, and the city is built. So if we mourn the destruction of the temple and said Jerusalem is destroyed, there's nothing there, that's sort of like a blasphemy against God. God has done all these, miracles to the Jewish people, and we're just going to continue as if none of that exists. So this responsum is very smartly by Rabbi Tuvia Friedman and Rabbi Reuven Hammer, two great conservative rabbis who've passed away, say a historical precedent of prohibiting fasting on days in which Israel was saved from disasters. Such a precedent is cited in Megillat Ta'anit that we read before. There is a clear historical precedent of canceling a fast on days in which the Jewish people was saved from a disaster. We have been so fortunate as to witness the founding of the state of Israel, where Jews are sitting on their land as a sovereign people. In light of this decisive change in the history of the Jewish people, I propose marking this change by not completing the fast of Tisha B'Av and concluding the fast with a Mincha Gdola service, which means like around 1:30, 2 o'clock, you would finish the fast and not wait till 8:30 in the evening. So that is sort of like my take on Tisha B'Av with the help of the sources that I brought you here. I also don't fast the entire day. I fast only until Mincha. and following this sort of like feeling that things have changed in history, and we need to recognize that as well. Any questions or comments?
What time is Mincha?
Like on Mincha, you could start reciting it. It depends on the time of the year. Okay, sometimes it could be 12 o'clock when it's winter time, and in the summertime it would be more like start from 1:30, 2 o'clock. Again, depends where you are geographically, but this is sort of like where we are. And you would also be able to do it until like 20 minutes before like around sundown. You could still do mincha. Okay, so that's sort of like the timeline that you could do mincha.
At Ramah, do they have mincha after lunch or do they do it later?
Oh, I don't know. I think after lunch, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. Very good. So I want to give you some materials. Okay, this Friday we have a wonderful person who's leading services, and he happens to be my nephew. He's a musician and a singer, and he's going to read from the Torah, etc. Then on August 10th, here, please give this out as well. On August 10th, we have a speaker who was a soldier who fought in the tunnels, and that's actually also my nephew. But we didn't advertise his name because we didn't.
Family here.
Yeah, but we didn't want to associate that, like too publicly with everything that's going on in the world today. We didn't want his name associated with that. But he's going to tell about the few months that he was in Gaza and in the tunnels. He had a very special part in that war there. That's going to be very interesting, and you'll hear about. And here's the flyer about Tisha B'Av. Okay, sorry, Sandra, for making you work so hard today. So that's about that. Okay, very good. Hello to my mother, and I want everyone to please join me in singing. Hold on.